The evening streets of the alien market were filled with noise, flashing lights, and the smell of strange food. Merchants shouted loudly, trying to sell their goods. Humans and aliens walked side by side, but no one paid attention to the small alien girl standing quietly in the corner. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly in the dim light, and her little hands held a piece of broken paper with something written on it. She looked nervous, her small body shaking from the cold wind that slipped through the alleys. A human traveler, tall and tired after a long day of work, walked past the stalls. His name was Daniel. He had just arrived on this planet for trade, and he wanted only to find a place to rest. But as he passed the lonely corner, he heard a soft voice. "Excuse me, sir?" the girl whispered, almost afraid to speak. Daniel turned his head. At first, he thought she was asking for money or food like many other street children. But when his eyes met hers, he saw something different. Her face was not dirty, not like a beggar's. It was clean, though pale. She had strange silver markings on her cheeks, and her hair shimmered faintly under the neon lights of the market. She was clearly an alien child, no older than 7 or 8. "What is it, little one?" Daniel asked softly, lowering his voice so she would not be frightened. The girl looked up at him with eyes filled with fear and hope at the same time. Her lips trembled as she spoke words that shocked him. "My mom is so lonely. Can you please be my dad at her birthday party?" For a second, Daniel thought he had misheard. A request so strange, so direct, could not be real. He blinked, trying to understand. "Your dad?" he repeated. The girl nodded quickly, clutching the broken paper in her hands. "Yes, please, just for today. She will be happy if someone comes. She is always sad. She has no one." I want her to smile again. Daniel felt a wave of confusion. In the busy marketplace, with hundreds of voices calling out, her small words cut through all the noise. Why would a little alien girl ask a stranger, a human, to pretend to be her father? There was something unusual, almost desperate in her eyes. He crouched down to her level. "Where is your mother?" The girl pointed down a narrow alley that looked darker than the rest of the street. "Home. I made this invitation." She held out the broken paper, and Daniel saw childish drawings of a cake, candles, and 2 figures holding hands. Written in shaky letters were the words, "Happy birthday, Mom." Something inside Daniel stirred. He was a wanderer, moving from planet to planet, never staying in one place, never belonging. He had no family left, and he never thought about birthdays anymore. But here was a little girl, begging him to come, begging him to fill a hole in her mother's heart. Still, he hesitated. "Why me?" he asked gently. "Why not someone you know?" Her eyes lowered. "Nobody comes. Neighbors don't like us. Other children laugh at me. My mom is always alone. I thought, maybe a human will say yes." Her words felt heavy, pressing against Daniel's chest. A human will say yes. Was that how she saw him? Different from others. Someone who could bring kindness where no one else would. He took a deep breath. "All right," he said slowly. "I will come with you. Just to make your mother happy." The girl's face lit up, a sudden spark of joy breaking through her sadness. She grabbed his hand tightly, as if afraid he would disappear. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." As they walked together into the dark alley, Daniel felt uneasy. The noise of the market faded behind them, replaced by silence. Shadows stretched across the narrow walls, and the air grew colder. The girl walked with confidence, as though she knew every crack and turn of this hidden path. Finally, they reached a small door made of rusted metal. The girl pushed it open carefully. Inside was a dimly lit room, warm but poor. The walls were patched with old fabric to block the wind, and the floor was covered with worn blankets. In the center sat a woman, her head bent low as she sewed a torn piece of clothing. She looked up when she heard the door. Her eyes, tired and lonely, widened in shock when she saw Daniel standing behind her daughter. She froze, the needle trembling in her hand. "Mom!" the little girl shouted with joy. "Look, I found someone. He will be your guest for your birthday." The woman stared at Daniel with confusion and suspicion. She was beautiful in a sad way, her alien features soft but marked by years of sorrow. Slowly she stood up, her eyes filled with questions she could not yet speak. Daniel felt his heart beat faster. What had he agreed to? What secret story lay hidden behind this lonely family? Why did the girl trust him? And why did the mother look both frightened and hopeful at the same time? The silence stretched, broken only by the little girl's excited giggle as she pulled Daniel forward. "Mom, he will make you smile today." And in that moment, Daniel knew this was no ordinary invitation. This was the start of something deeper, something that would change all of their lives forever. The dim light of the room flickered as the old lamp struggled to stay alive. Daniel stood just inside the doorway, uncertain whether he should step further. The little girl still held his hand tightly, her face glowing with excitement. But her mother, standing by the table, looked shocked and cautious. Her deep violet eyes locked on the stranger, scanning him carefully as if trying to decide whether he was a friend or a threat. For a long moment, no one spoke. The silence pressed heavily, broken only by the faint humming of the lamp and the distant sounds of the busy market outside. Finally, the woman found her voice. "Who is this, Lyra?" she asked, her voice soft yet trembling with suspicion. The little girl, Lyra, smiled proudly. "Mom, he is the guest I told you about. He will join us for your birthday."
He said yes. The mother's expression hardened slightly.
She set down the piece of clothing she had been sewing and wiped her hands nervously against her dress. Her eyes moved from Lyra to Daniel. "Sir, I don't know who you are, or why you are here. My daughter should not trouble strangers." Daniel raised his hands gently, showing he meant no harm. "Please don't blame her. She only wanted to make you smile. I am a traveler. My name is Daniel. I didn't plan to intrude, but she asked me with such honest words. I couldn't say no." The mother studied him for another moment, then lowered her gaze. She sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of life pressed too heavily upon them. "You should not waste your time here," she whispered. "We have nothing. No fine food, no gifts. Only silence and sadness." Daniel stepped forward slowly. "Sometimes silence needs breaking," he replied softly. "And sadness can be lighter if it is shared." Her eyes flickered at his words, and for the first time, Daniel thought he saw a faint spark behind them. Lyra clapped her hands happily. "See, Mom? I told you he would make you smile." The woman turned away quickly, hiding her face. Her hands trembled as she reached for a cup to pour water. Daniel noticed it was cracked, patched together with metal strips. The home was poor, too poor for comfort. The walls were bare stone, the furniture little more than scraps salvaged from the streets. Yet everything was clean, carefully arranged, showing her effort to give her child a decent life despite hardship. Lyra ran to a small corner where she had placed something carefully hidden under cloth. She lifted it with pride and carried it to the table. It was a tiny cake, uneven and clumsy, clearly made by a child's hands. Some parts were burnt, others undercooked, but her smile made it shine brighter than the finest dessert. "I made this for you, Mom," she said, placing it gently before her. "And now we even have a guest. Isn't it wonderful?" The mother's hands shook as she covered her mouth. Her eyes filled with tears she tried hard to hold back. She bent down and hugged her daughter tightly. "Oh, my sweet Lyra, you shouldn't have done this. You worked too hard already." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. He could see the pain behind her eyes, the pain of years of loneliness, rejection, and silent suffering. He realized now that this woman had been living hidden, away from others, with no family, no friends, only her daughter to keep her company. And even her daughter was old enough to notice the emptiness. He spoke gently, hoping to ease the heaviness. "If you don't mind, may I stay? I know I am only a stranger, but perhaps it will make this birthday less lonely." The mother hesitated again, her heart torn between fear and gratitude. She looked at her daughter's shining face, then back at Daniel. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Very well. You may stay, but only tonight." Relief washed over Lyra's face. She grabbed Daniel's sleeve and pulled him toward the table. Sit. We can sing for Mom." And so in that poor little home under the flickering lamp, they sat together. Lyra's small voice filled the air as she sang an uneven birthday song. Daniel joined softly, his voice deep and warm. The mother sat silently, her hands folded, her eyes brimming with tears she could no longer hide. When the song ended, Daniel cut a small piece of the cake and offered it to her. She accepted with trembling hands, staring at him as if trying to understand his kindness. Slowly, she took a bite. It was rough, but to her it was sweeter than anything she had tasted in years. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. Daniel smiled gently. "It is not me you should thank. It is your daughter's love that brought us here." The woman looked at Lyra, then back at Daniel. For the first time that night, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. It was small, fragile, but real. Outside, the wind howled through the alleyways. But inside the room, a fragile warmth grew. Daniel felt it. The beginning of something more than a simple birthday. There was a hidden story here, something unspoken. He could sense secrets buried deep within this family, secrets that made the mother's eyes so heavy with sorrow. But for now, he said nothing. He simply shared the quiet moment, knowing that tonight, in this forgotten corner of the galaxy, he had become part of something that mattered. The little girl leaned against him, whispering softly, "See, I told you she would smile." And Daniel, for the first time in many years, felt his own heart smile too. The small fire in the corner flickered, casting shadows on the rough stone walls. Daniel sat quietly at the table, watching the mother and daughter. Lyra hummed softly as she fixed the crooked candles on the uneven cake. Her mother sat silently, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes lost in thoughts that seemed far away. Daniel could feel it. Something unspoken weighed heavily in this house. He had seen loneliness before, but this was different. This was not just the sadness of poverty. It was the sadness of someone who carried a story too heavy to tell. Finally, he spoke gently. "You never told me your name," he said, looking at the woman. She lifted her eyes slowly as if pulled back from a distant place. "My name is Saris," she replied softly. Her voice was calm, but Daniel felt a pain hidden inside it. "Saris," Daniel repeated, testing the name. "It is a good name. Strong." She gave a faint smile but said nothing. For a while, silence returned. Lyra tried to break it with small chatter, showing Daniel her little drawings on the cracked wall. Pictures of stars, moons, and a family. Always a mother, a child, and sometimes a tall shadow beside them. Daniel noticed it but said nothing, knowing too well what it meant. At last, curiosity pressed too hard. He looked at Saris again. "Why do you live here away from everyone? The market is full of people, yet you seem alone." Her body stiffened. Her hands tightened into fists. For a moment he thought she would not answer. But then slowly she spoke. "Because the past never leaves us," she whispered. Her words made Daniel lean closer. "What past?" Saris looked away. Her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "Once I had a family, a husband, a home. We lived in the upper levels of the city, where the towers touched the clouds. My husband was a soldier, a proud warrior who believed in justice. But one day the war came closer. He was sent to fight, and he never returned. The government declared him dead, though no body was found." Her voice cracked and she paused. Daniel waited, his chest heavy with sympathy. "I was left with Lyra, just a baby in my arms. At first people pitied me. They gave me words of comfort. But soon whispers began. They said my husband had betrayed his people, that he had joined the rebels. They said I must have known that I was guilty too." Slowly doors closed. Friends turned away. Neighbors looked at me with hatred. We became unwanted. She finally looked at Daniel, her eyes filled with silent rage and sorrow. "So I left. I took my daughter and hid here where no one would see us. It was better to be forgotten than to live under their judgment." Daniel's heart tightened. He had seen injustice before, seen how war destroyed not only soldiers but also families. He knew the pain of being left behind. Still, he could feel there was more to her story, something deeper she had not said. "And since then?" he asked quietly. "Since then," Saris continued, her voice softer now, "my only purpose has been Lyra. I work, I mend, I sell what little I can in the market. I give her food before myself. I keep her safe even when I am not strong. But loneliness..." She stopped, her hands trembling. "Loneliness is a shadow that grows heavier every year." Daniel swallowed hard. He glanced at Lyra, who was busy arranging her tiny toys near the cake, pretending not to hear. But her little shoulders were tense. She had heard every word. It was then Daniel understood why Lyra had begged him. The child had seen her mother's suffering and wanted, even for one night, to bring her happiness. "You are strong," Daniel said finally. "Stronger than you think." "And your daughter sees it." Saris shook her head. "Strength does not fill an empty chair. It does not silence the whispers of the past. My husband is gone. My place in this world is gone. We live only because we must." Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. "No, you live because hope still lives in you. If it didn't, you would not smile for your daughter. You would not keep her safe." For the first time, Saris looked at him with something other than sorrow. There was a flicker of respect in her eyes. But it was faint, fragile, like a candle struggling against the wind. The night grew deeper. Outside, the market's noise had faded, replaced by the distant hum of ships flying above the city. Inside, Daniel felt the weight of Saris's story settle into his heart. He had promised himself never to get attached, never to stay anywhere long enough to care. But now, sitting here with this lonely mother and her brave little girl, he wondered if the universe had brought him here for a reason. Lyra broke the silence, her voice small but determined. "Mom, one day Daddy will come back." "I know it, he's just lost. And until then, maybe Daniel can stay, at least for tonight." Daniel froze, surprised by her innocent words. Saris lowered her gaze, hiding the storm in her heart. A strange unease passed over the room as if the shadows themselves leaned closer. Daniel sensed it, the story was not over. The past Saris carried was not just about loss. There was more. Something hidden, something dangerous. And he knew that sooner or later the truth would come knocking at their door. The night air inside the small home was heavy with quiet emotions. After Saris had shared fragments of her painful past, Daniel could feel the sadness wrapping around the room like a cold blanket. But Lyra, full of innocent hope, refused to let the night turn dark. She jumped from her seat and began to arrange the small table with pieces of broken cups, tin plates, and her little toys lined up as guests. "Look, Mom," she said cheerfully, "now we have a full party. Everyone is here to celebrate you." Saris gave a faint smile, though her eyes still carried sorrow. Daniel watched her carefully. She had lived too long in silence, and even now her smile was fragile, almost like glass. Something inside him stirred, an urge to see that smile become real. Quietly, he stood and excused himself, stepping out into the cold night. The alley was silent, shadows curling along the walls. He made his way back toward the marketplace. Most stalls were closing, merchants packing their goods, but Daniel found what he needed. A small loaf of bread, some sweet fruit, and a tiny bundle of candles shaped like stars. He paid with the last of his spare credits. When he returned, Saris looked startled. "You left," she whispered, almost afraid. Daniel smiled and placed the things on the table. "A birthday needs more than shadows. Tonight, at least, you should feel like someone cares." Lyra's eyes widened with delight. "Candles." "Real candles." She jumped up and down, clapping her hands. Saris froze, staring at the items. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to protest, but no words came. Slowly, she reached out and touched the star-shaped candles with trembling fingers. For years, she had lived with almost nothing. To her, even this small gesture felt overwhelming. Daniel lit the candles one by one. The dim room filled with a warm golden glow, chasing away the shadows. The flames reflected in Saris's violet eyes, making them shine like forgotten jewels. Lyra began to sing again, louder this time, her sweet voice filling the space. "Happy birthday, Mom." "Happy birthday to you." Daniel joined softly, his deep voice blending with Lyra's. Saris covered her face with her hands, and for the first time in many years, tears fell freely. But they were not only tears of sorrow, they were tears of warmth, of feeling something she thought she had lost forever, and love. "Make a wish, Mom," Lyra shouted, bouncing with excitement. Saris closed her eyes, the candlelight flickering against her face. For a long moment she stayed still, her lips moving in silence. Then she blew gently and the flames vanished, leaving thin trails of smoke in the air. "What did you wish for?" Daniel asked softly. Saris looked at him, her cheeks wet with tears, and whispered, "I wished for one night without loneliness." Daniel's chest tightened. Without thinking, he reached across the table and squeezed her hand lightly. She did not pull away. The little family, though fragile and incomplete, sat together that night as if they truly belonged. They shared the bread, the fruit, and Lyra's uneven cake. They laughed at her jokes, clapped as she pretended her toys were guests giving speeches, and even hummed an old song Saris used to sing long ago. For a brief time, the heavy past and the cruel world outside faded away. But in the corner of Daniel's mind, a shadow still lingered. He remembered Saris's words, "The past never leaves us." He had seen the way her eyes darkened when she spoke of her husband. He had heard the whispers in the market about her. Something told him this peace was fragile, and danger was closer than it appeared. Later that night, When Lyra finally grew sleepy and curled up in a blanket beside her toys, Daniel helped Saris clean the small table. She avoided his gaze, her movements quick, as though she feared showing too much gratitude. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied, "but sometimes the smallest moments matter the most. You deserve more than silence on your birthday." Her lips curved into another small smile, but there was sadness behind it. "You speak kindly, but kindness often has a price. Why did you really agree to come here?" Daniel hesitated. He wanted to say it was only because of Lyra's innocent request. But deep inside, he knew the truth. He was tired of being rootless, tired of wandering without purpose. Maybe this was fate's way of reminding him that even strangers could become family. "I came because no child should have to beg a stranger to make her mother smile," he said finally. Saris froze at his words, her eyes wide with surprise. Slowly, she turned away, as if afraid he had seen too deeply into her soul. The night grew colder, but inside the room the warmth of the small celebration lingered. Daniel lay on a blanket near the door, keeping watch while Saris and Lyra rested. His mind wandered. He wondered what kind of man Saris's husband had been, and why people hated her so much. As sleep tried to claim him, he heard faint sounds from the alley outside, soft footsteps, then whispers. His hand moved to the knife at his belt. The voices were low, almost careful, as if they were searching. Daniel's eyes narrowed. The wish Saris had made, one night without loneliness, might be cut short by something darker waiting beyond the door. He stayed awake, listening to the whispers fade into the distance. For now they were safe, but he knew the shadows would return, and when they did, he would be ready. The first light of dawn crept into the small home, painting the stone walls with pale gold. Daniel had not slept much. He sat near the door, hand resting on the hilt of his knife, listening for every sound. The whispers from the alley the night before still haunted his thoughts. They had been close, too close, like hunters waiting for their prey. When Saris woke, her eyes immediately fell on him. She saw the tired lines on his face, the way his body tensed as if ready to fight. She frowned. "You stayed awake," she said softly. Daniel nodded. "I heard something outside, whispers, people moving in the dark." "I don't think they were common thieves," her face paled. She turned away quickly as though hiding something. Daniel noticed her trembling hands. "Saris," he said firmly, "tell me what you know. Who would follow you in the night?" For a long time she said nothing. She poured water into a cracked bowl for Lyra, who had just woken and rubbed sleep from her eyes. Only when her daughter left the room to play with her toys did Saris finally speak, her voice low and heavy. "They have found me," she whispered. Daniel leaned closer. "Who?" Saris's violet eyes filled with fear. "The syndicate, the mob. They never forgave me for running away." The words struck him like a stone. He had heard of the syndicate, an underground empire of smugglers, assassins, and war profiteers that spread across many systems. They were ruthless, their power greater than most governments dared admit. "What do they want with you?" Daniel asked. Saris's shoulders shook. "Years ago, before Lyra was born, I was forced into their world. I was married to a man tied to the syndicate. A powerful man. He was cruel, but no one dared defy him. When he died, they wanted me to stay under their control. But I could not. I ran away with my child. For years I hid, moving from one place to another, always in the shadows. I thought maybe here in this forgotten part of the city we were safe. But the syndicate never forgets. They always search." Daniel's jaw tightened. Now it made sense. The way neighbors avoided her, the whispers in the market, the fear in her eyes. She was not just a lonely widow. She was a fugitive from one of the most dangerous organizations in the galaxy. "And Lyra?" he asked quietly. Saris closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "They will take her if they find her. They will use her as leverage, or worse. They will raise her as one of their own." Daniel's fist clenched. He had seen enough cruelty in his travels to know the syndicate would not hesitate. He looked at the little girl playing happily, unaware of the storm waiting outside. His heart hardened with determination. "You cannot keep running forever," Daniel said. "They will catch up eventually, unless—" He paused, unsure if he should say the words. "Unless you fight back." Saris shook her head violently. "No, I have no strength left. I cannot fight them. I only wanted a quiet life for my daughter. But a quiet life is impossible if the past is chasing you," Daniel argued. You must choose. Keep hiding until they take everything from you, or stand up even if it's hard. Her hands trembled as she covered her face. I am not strong enough. Daniel reached across the table and gripped her wrists gently, pulling her hands away so she would look at him. You are stronger than you believe. Last night your daughter smiled because of you. Do you think she would beg a stranger to come here if she didn't see your worth? Saris, you survived all these years. That is not weakness. That is strength. Her eyes widened at his words. For the first time, a spark of defiance flickered in them. At that moment, Lyra ran back into the room holding her toy figures. Look, Daniel, this one is you. This one is Mommy, and this one is me. We're a family now. Her innocent words struck Daniel and Saris like a blade and a balm at once. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with emotions neither of them could voice. Suddenly, a loud knock shattered the fragile peace. It was harsh, sharp, echoing through the small home like a threat. Lyra froze, her toy falling from her hand. Saris's face went pale. Another knock. Then a voice deep and cold. Saris, open the door. You've hidden long enough. Daniel's hand flew to his knife. He motioned for Saris to take Lyra and step back. His eyes locked on the door, his muscles tense. Saris's body shook. She clutched Lyra tightly to her chest, whispering, Don't be afraid, my child. But her own voice trembled with terror. Daniel looked at her, his voice low and steady. Stay behind me. Whatever happens, I will not let them take you. The knocking grew louder, more impatient. Then came the sound of metal scraping, the lock being forced. Daniel's heart pounded, but his resolve was iron. He had wandered across the stars with no purpose, no family, no ties. But now, in this poor little home, he had found something worth protecting. As the door creaked open, revealing shadowy figures with cruel eyes and weapons glinting in the dim light, Daniel stepped forward, his knife gleaming in his hand. He was ready. The rusted door creaked open with a long, painful groan. Cold morning light spilled into the room, along with the shadows of 3 tall figures. Their faces were half hidden under dark hoods, but the sharp glint of their weapons told Daniel exactly what they were. Syndicate men, ruthless hunters. The first one stepped forward, his voice low and heavy. Saris, he said slowly, almost like a predator savoring its prey. You thought you could hide forever? The boss has been patient, too patient, but patience runs out. Saris tightened her grip on Lyra, pulling her daughter into the far corner of the room. Her face was pale, her body trembling, but her eyes were fierce. She knew exactly what they had come for. Daniel stood in front of them, his knife held low but steady. You'll take no one from this house, he said firmly. The man sneered, amused. A human? He let out a cold laugh. What is this? Did she pick up a stray traveler to protect her? Step aside, human. This does not concern you. Daniel's jaw clenched. It concerns me now. The syndicate men exchanged looks, then burst into cruel laughter. One of them spat on the floor. You'll be dead in seconds. The first one raised his weapon, a sharp blade with glowing edges. But before he could swing, Daniel moved. His knife flashed, blocking the strike, the sound of metal clashing echoing in the small room. The fight had begun. Daniel pushed forward with raw strength, slamming his shoulder into the man's chest and sending him stumbling back against the wall. The second syndicate thug lunged, swinging a metal rod, but Daniel ducked low and drove his knife across the man's arm. The thug screamed, dropping his weapon. Lyra cried out from the corner, covering her ears. Saris held her tighter, whispering frantic prayers. The leader roared in anger. Kill him! The third man rushed Daniel, tackling him hard to the ground. Dust rose from the stone floor as both men struggled. Daniel gritted his teeth, punching the thug in the face, but a fist crashed into his jaw, making his head spin. The syndicate man pinned him down, pressing a blade dangerously close to his neck. You're nothing, the thug hissed. One cut and you're gone. Daniel's vision blurred, but in that moment he heard a small voice, Lyra's voice. Don't take my new dad away. She screamed. The words struck Daniel like fire through his veins. Strength surged inside him, raw and unbreakable. With a growl, he twisted his body, shoving his knee into the thug's stomach. The man gasped, loosening his grip. Daniel grabbed his knife and drove the hilt into the thug's temple, knocking him out cold. Panting, Daniel pushed himself back to his feet. Blood trickled from his lip, his muscles ached, but he stood tall. The leader snarled, fury burning in his eyes. You think you can protect her? You don't understand what she is. She belongs to us. Daniel's eyes narrowed. No, she belongs to no one. And neither does her daughter. The leader roared and charged. His glowing blade swung down with deadly force, sparks flying as it clashed against Daniel's knife. Blow after blow rained down, each one heavier than the last. Daniel's arms trembled from the strain, but he refused to fall. Saris, watching from the corner, could no longer stay silent. She reached for a broken chair leg and hurled it with all her strength. It struck the leader's shoulder, making him stumble for just a second. That second was enough. Daniel drove forward, slamming his knife across the man's side. The leader cried out, collapsing to one knee. His blade fell from his hand, clattering to the floor. Silence filled the room except for heavy breathing. Daniel stood over the fallen man, his chest heaving, his knife still ready. The leader looked up at him, hatred burning in his eyes. You can hurt me, but the syndicate will never stop. Others will come. Stronger men. You've only delayed the inevitable. Daniel leaned down, his voice like steel. Then I'll be ready. Every time. The thug spat blood, then crawled out of the doorway, dragging his wounded companions with him. Their shadows vanished into the alley, leaving only silence and the faint morning light. Inside the small home, Lyra burst into sobs, rushing into Daniel's arms. You saved us. You really saved us. Daniel knelt, holding her tightly. I promised I wouldn't let them take you, he whispered. His heart, once hardened by years of wandering, now felt heavy with something else, responsibility. Saris stepped forward, her hands trembling. Why did you fight for us? You could have walked away. You could have saved yourself. Daniel looked at her, his lip bleeding, his eyes fierce but soft. Because no one should fight alone, not you. Not her. For a moment, Saris stared at him, her heart torn between gratitude and fear. She wanted to thank him, to cry, to scream. But all she could do was whisper, They will come again. You heard him. The syndicate will not stop. Daniel nodded slowly. Then neither will I. The room was silent again, but the silence was different now. It was not just fear, it was the silence after a storm, heavy with the promise of more battles to come. And yet, as Saris looked at Daniel holding her daughter, she saw something she had not felt in years: hope. The room was still, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and blood. The syndicate men were gone, but their shadow lingered like poison in the corners of the house. Daniel sat against the wall, catching his breath, his knife lying beside him. His lip was cut and his arms were sore, but his eyes remained sharp, watching the door as if danger might return at any moment. Lyra sat curled up against his chest, refusing to let go. Her small hands clutched his shirt, her face buried in his shoulder. She was shaking, but she whispered again and again, You saved us. You saved us. Sarah stood nearby, her violet eyes fixed on Daniel. She had seen courage before, on the battlefield, in her husband's defiance against the syndicate, but this was different. Daniel was not bound to them, not by blood, not by duty. He had every reason to walk away, yet he stayed. He fought for them as if their lives mattered more than his own. Finally, she broke the silence. They will return, she whispered, her voice low but certain. The syndicate doesn't forgive. They don't forget. You've put yourself in danger by standing with us. Daniel looked up at her, his expression calm. Maybe so. But some things are worth the risk. Saris's lips trembled. Why? Why would a stranger risk everything for us? Daniel lowered his gaze to the little girl in his arms. Because she asked me, he said simply. Because her words reminded me of something I thought I'd lost a long time ago. Saris blinked, surprised. What was that? Daniel's eyes softened. Family. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Saris's heart tightened. For years she had fought to protect Lyra alone. For years she had believed loneliness was her only future. Yet here was a man who had stepped into their lives uninvited and given them something she thought she would never feel again: safety, warmth, hope. Lyra lifted her head, her wide eyes shining with innocence. Does this mean you'll stay? Will you be my dad? Not just for the party, but forever? Daniel froze. The question cut deeper than any blade. He looked at Saris, who quickly lowered her gaze, afraid to show the storm in her heart. He took a deep breath. I don't know what forever looks like, he said slowly. But I know I won't walk away. Not while you need me. Lyra's smile returned, small but bright, as if the whole galaxy had just been given back to her. She hugged him tighter. Saris turned away, hiding the tears that threatened to fall. Her heart longed to believe him, but fear still gripped her. The syndicate would not stop. They would send more men, stronger and crueler. Was it fair to let Daniel stay, to let him risk his life for them? And yet, could she bear to push him away when he was the first light to enter their darkness in years? As the sun rose higher, Daniel stood and began to repair the broken door with what little tools Saris had. His movements were steady, determined, as though he was fixing more than just wood and metal. Saris watched him, her chest tight with unspoken words. At last she whispered, Maybe we can't run anymore. Maybe it's time to stop hiding." Daniel glanced at her, his eyes steady. "Then we fight. Together. If the syndicate comes, they'll find more than just a lonely mother. They'll find a family ready to stand." Her lips curved into a trembling smile. For the first time in many years, the word family did not feel like a memory. It felt alive. That evening, when the city lights flickered on and shadows stretched across the alley, Saris sat with Daniel and Lyra. They ate simple food together, their laughter breaking through the silence of the small home. For a moment it felt like the universe outside did not exist. Only this tiny circle of warmth did. Lyra curled up between them, her small hand slipping into Saris's on one side and Daniel's on the other. She looked up sleepily and whispered, "We're not lonely anymore." Daniel looked at Saris, and for the first time she didn't turn away. Their eyes met, filled with unspoken promises. No matter what came tomorrow, whether syndicate assassins or whispers from the past, they would not face it alone. In that quiet, fragile moment, Saris realized something. The syndicate could hunt her, the city could scorn her, the galaxy could turn its back. But as long as she had Lyra's laughter and Daniel's courage beside her, she was no longer just a fugitive, no longer just a widow. She was a mother with something worth protecting. And Daniel, the wandering human who once had no place to belong, now had a reason to fight. And a family to call his own. The small home, once filled with silence, now carried the sound of hope. For the first time in years, Saris whispered a prayer, not for escape, not for survival, but for tomorrow. Because now tomorrow felt possible. And as Daniel sat beside her, his hand resting gently near hers, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe even happiness was not too far away.